Welcome, I'm Mike Murray.
I'm Tony Clark.
And this is Mental Health Today.
In today's episode, we will be talking about teaching empathy in schools and when is the best time to implement such a program.
And this is October and it's National Bullying Prevention Month. We're going to talk more about bullying in our main topic.
And in today's segment of Truth with Tony, I have a special message for the students and faculty of the class of 1993 for both Magruder High School and the Chelsea School.
All that and more here on Mental Health Today. I love that song, don't you? Linkin Park? Yeah. Welcome back, and this is October and it's National Bullying Prevention Month, and here's a statistic for you. 20% of high school students say they're bullied today. 16% say they're electronically bullied, I guess through social media and so forth.
And I think the numbers are a lot higher than that.
Yeah.
I do believe that maybe only 20% tell somebody.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. That's like the 20% that suffer from depression. 1 in 5 suffer from depression. That's a number they're giving, but I really think that's higher too. In fact, most of these mental health statistics are probably higher.
Yeah, and that's my problem with statistics, because they only focus on one specific subset of people, and they only focus on 500 to 1,000 cases, and then that's how they base their numbers on.
Yeah.
There's no guarantee, like the numbers I gave last week with the 42,673 suicides every year in the United States. I'm sure that it's a lot more.
Yeah.
But they're just basing it on numbers, that they get. Interesting segue to that, though, was while I was doing research for this show, I watched a half-hour documentary on the Golden Gate Bridge and how it was built. It started construction in 1933, was finished in 1937. Since 1937, 1,288 people have jumped off that bridge to their death.
No kidding. Wow. That also makes me think of a recent situation at Virginia Commonwealth University where 2 women in the same month jumped out of their window, and the police said there's no foul play involved, but none of the articles really mention that they may have jumped to commit suicide. There's really no mention of that. So if they don't say it's suicide, that doesn't go down as a suicide. That goes down as what? An accidental fall?
Accidental death.
If that's the case.
Yeah. And I get so sick of society today. It's not just the school system, it's the news, it's the media. If they don't talk about something, it's like it's not there.
Yeah.
It's like how enraged I was last week when I was talking to you about the lady I saw on the news saying, well, if you bring up suicide in schools, it's going to give people the idea to kill themselves.
Yeah, and that's a good segue to our next segment, which is something that they do have to bring up, bullying in schools, and we're going to talk about empathy in schools. The School Bully. Yeah, that's from Tommy by The Who. And
Who?
The Who. Now that's more, bullying didn't begin recently with social media. I mean, it's been around for a long time, obviously.
It's a new class of bullying.
It is a new class of bullying, but in this case, it's, we're talking about empathy and trying to find solutions to mental health problems today. And And, we talk about, there's a study about nurturing from 0 to 3 years old and trying to get the foundation of a child to experience acceptance and love. And then you send them off to school, you take them out of the home, and then they're experiencing a number of different kids, and that's a whole different problem.
Yeah, but look, I don't imagine to know what it's like to be a parent because I am not one, okay? However, I can say my parents could only do so much. They made me fear doing the wrong thing, mm-hmm. which is what they're supposed to do, mm-hmm. okay? So they laid that seed.
Or teach you right from wrong.
They laid that seed
mm-hmm.
of having empathy for people.
Mm-hmm.
And when a perfect example is when I went to vision school before first grade, I was sent to this vision school. There was a blind girl in the school with me, and I used to walk her around everywhere. I took care of her. My mom was so proud of that. I'll never forget that. One of my first memories is my mom being so proud of how I was interacting with this girl who couldn't do things for herself. That must have made my mom proud.
Mm-hmm.
But then the parents can only do so much, because then they turn you over to the school system. And for 8 hours a day, you're with a bunch of kids mm-hmm. and adults. And those adults are more than teachers. Mm-hmm. They're more than babysitters. They mold you into a lot of the things you become.
Mm-hmm.
So, and you can't address bullying at the middle school or high school level, because by then it's too late.
Mm-hmm.
They've already been shaped, they've already been formed. They're not going to gain empathy
right.
from an empathy class when they're a teenager.
The prevention really has to happen in elementary school.
And I've had discussions with you where I've said my key was I started feeling different in 3rd grade.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say that you take the money from the public schools that they're using on these drunk driving campaigns that don't do a damn thing. They don't prevent one death. Mm-hmm. Okay? They think it looks good to parents because they put the car out in front of the school. It's all wrecked and says don't drink and drive. But every single school, at least in Montgomery County, for the last few years, every single school, somebody dies from drunk driving.
Yeah, you're not going to be able to control that just because somebody says that. I remember when somebody came to our high school and he was paralyzed, after a drunk driving accident. And he was at we were at the assembly, and he said, "I'm not trying to lecture you. I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm just showing you what the consequences might be." That never stopped anyone I knew from drinking and driving or doing drugs.
And that's where I argue with you about your point. You sit there and say, well, wouldn't it be better for a bully to talk to the kids and say, I bullied people? That was your argument.
I argue that somebody who goes to jail, who's in jail.
Yeah, but still, you just disproved your own theory by what you said. Because, they're not going to listen. Even if that person's been to jail, they're not going to listen.
Well, maybe not a high school student, but maybe like a kid in 2nd grade, 3rd grade.
My father, for instance, when he taught me the life lesson of, don't ever get in a jam I can't get you out of, which I've talked to you about,
mm-hmm.
That message hit home for me that, if I did get into a certain trouble where I crossed the line, not to call him.
Mm-hmm.
I had 2 instances in my life where I did something stupid and I did something impulsive, and it was going to have consequences, but not legal consequences.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to my father and I said, look, I feel really bad about doing this to this person. What can I do? And my dad wrote me a check and said send it to him, because I had ripped him off of some money.
Oh, okay.
And he said just send it to him. And he goes, that's what I meant when I told you, don't ever get in a jam I can't get you out of. Now, it still taught me the accountability, because I still had to go to my dad and be like, Dad, I screwed up.
Mm-hmm.
I can't, so I've always had that empathy, but my thing is now, my hard point is I don't have empathy for people who aren't helping themselves.
Right, but
I can't get it.
But what you're talking about, though, is about teaching it early on.
Yes.
Now, I was a camp counselor for about 7 summers, and I recognize how kids can change in their teenage years from being second graders or third graders or even fourth graders. I remember when a police officer came to our school, and I think I was in 4th or 5th grade, maybe it was 5th grade, and one of the things that he said to me, or said to us, was that police officers, if you don't treat them well, they can sit there and look at a car and say, oh, look at this, your headlight is out, or oh, look at this, I see your tires aren't, and they could find ways to mess you up. So you better treat an officer right, okay? That meant something when he said that. If an officer, police officer, comes in and talks to kids about empathy, about bullying, about not being bullies, if they have somebody who went to jail trying to scare these kids straight at a very young age, say 3rd grade, isn't that more effective?
No. The teacher needs to do it.
Really?
Yeah. Here's the thing for me. If a cop came to me at that young of an age, first of all, I'm not even sure in 3rd grade if I knew what a cop actually did. Okay? Now I know that they're supposedly there to protect and serve. I don't think it would hold any weight, because if you have an actual class, now maybe if the cop's teaching the class, but that has to be a pretty shiny cop. He can't have anything on his record. He can't have anything, any accidental things on his record in terms of being a police officer, because parents look into stuff like that.
Yeah, but we're talking about police officer goes into schools and talks to the kids.
I still don't think it holds any weight. I think, again, you're trying to pass the buck, and that's what I'm trying to discourage. What I'm trying to discourage is, stop passing the buck. School system, please take some accountability and responsibility for the things you are not doing to protect your students.
Okay. All right. Well, but we do agree that this has to be done at an early age.
Absolutely. And I think 8 or 9 years old is old enough to where you can kind of mold the and it also helps in terms of red flagging kids. The kids that are struggling with empathy at that early age, those are the kids you put in the special schools. Those are the kids that you end up at RICA, Regional Institute of Children and Adolescents, and I'm sure all other towns have schools like that where they put troubled kids in those things. And I think that by red flagging them, and I know that's very unpopular, but by doing that, you are helping decrease the bullying.
Are you really?
Yes, because you're taking that one segment of people who are struggling with empathy, and you're taking them over here and putting them over here. Okay? It's the same thing they did with kids when I was young, but they did it to learning disabled kids.
Okay.
They said, all right, well, you can still go to public school, but you got to go to these special classes.
Okay, is this tracking them for the future? Because there is this idea of tracking.
Yeah.
And you're going.
And I think there should be.
Are you going to end up with the bullies end up just being tracked into a certain segment that's going to end up in prison or?
No, because I do believe in rehabilitation, and I do believe that everybody can change.
Okay.
However, at a certain point, you can't teach empathy anymore.
Okay.
You just can't.
Okay.
When you're older and your brain's already developed, and you've already been taught everything that there is to been taught, you can't go to someone who's 30 years old and doesn't give a damn about anybody.
Right.
Well, make them give a damn about people.
When's that point where you can't go back?
I honestly think middle school. 6th grade was the worst year of my life. 7th grade was even worse, in terms of... 6th grade wasn't the worst year of my life. I misspoke. 6th grade, my sister was in 8th grade. I thank God for that. I survived 6th grade just because of her. She was extremely popular. Anybody that messed with me, she went to her friends, and her friends would bully them and be like, leave Tony alone. When she left to go to Magruder, and I'm sitting in 7th grade at Redland, all the fear that I had every day in 6th grade was magnified. Because there was no protection there whatsoever.
Yeah, I can tell you that I agree with you. I think that once you get to a certain age, either late in elementary school, certainly by the time you get to 7th grade, there's no turning back, because we had so many fights in 7th and 8th grade. That's a certain age where, I don't know what it is, maybe it's adolescence, but there's fights every day. And we can only imagine about social media. And let's talk about that more as we move into more about bullying.
But the last thing I want to say before we move to the next segment, and this is really important to me, and it's to give the viewers an idea. Okay, my school life sucked. Okay, I hated school. When my parents told me I had to go back to school every year, I ran away from home. That's how bad I didn't want to be there. I was suffering. There was nothing my parents could do. They tried to go to the school system, and the school system said, well, it's just kids being kids. I want to make very clear right now, I had a decent home life, okay? But at the same time, my parents could only do so much. And that's where I'm talking about the school system needs to hold some responsibility, that they are helping you raise your child. Mm-hmm. And to ignore bullying and say it's just kids being kids, you're walking a slippery slope there.
Right, and obviously you can see how much this has affected you, and that 20% of high school students say that they've been bullied. We just said we thought the number much higher.
I mean, I'm 41 years old, and the stuff that happened to me when I was 12 is still affecting me today.
Yeah, and also we didn't grow up with the social media, and we can
thank God for that, though. But you know, because we didn't grow up with it, we laugh at it and we think it's funny. But the person who's 12, 14 years old, who only experiences social media, we didn't have that. That's their connection to the world.
Yeah.
And they get bullied over social media. I sit there and laugh and going, oh, tough guy behind a computer, you know. But to them, it's just as severe as me running to the school bus every day to avoid the bullies.
Right. Let's talk about that more coming up as we talk more about bullying.
Johnny boy always played the fool. He broke all the rules so you would think he was cool. He was never really one of the guys. No matter how hard he tried, up the thought of suicide. It's kind of hard when you ain't got no friends. He put his life to an end. They might remember him then.
Welcome back, and we're talking about bullying, past, present, and future. Of course, we know a lot about the past of bullying back in the 70s and 80s. It's not like bullying is anything new, but bullying took place in the schoolyard, and it dealt with kids getting into fights and getting beaten up or teased. And then now it's about the social media, and it's a little bit different than it was.
Until 7th grade, I did nothing myself to contribute to me being bullied. It was all them. Mm-hmm. 7th grade, I said, I no longer have my sister's protection, so I need to find some kind of mechanism, defense mechanism, if you will, to try to protect myself. Mm-hmm. So I became a class clown. Mm-hmm. And by doing so, it protected me by getting me to the principal's office before school would end, so I'd be closer to the school bus. Something that I wanted to touch on, though, I got beat up on a school bus. I forget how old I was. It was somewhere in middle school. I got beat up on a school bus, and I remember apologizing to my mom when she came to pick me up to take me home. I remember sitting there apologizing to my mom over and over again, and she's like, why are you apologizing to me? I felt guilty. I felt like I did something wrong when I didn't. The kid asked me, where did I live? I said, I live off of Bowie Mill Road, and the dude went ballistic on me. And when they had him strapped down to the seat in the bus, he kept saying, somebody better give me some mental health help or I'm going to kill somebody.
Really?
And I truly believe I came close to being killed that day. But I felt like it was my fault, even though I didn't do anything. So I was constantly apologizing to my mom and my dad, you know, making sure they knew that I didn't do anything for that to happen.
That's like the victim feeling like it's their fault. That happens a lot in cases of rape or sexual assault.
And that's why I think bullying and rape actually have two similar side effects. after the fact that it happens, the victim feels like it's their fault, like they did something, you know, and I didn't do anything. It was just obvious that I was different from a lot of the other kids in school. Whether it was my behavior, my voice went real high when I went through puberty. My sister used to tease me about it all the time, and we talked about the difference between teasing and bullying. My voice would crack constantly, and I was really insecure about it, and I took it with a grain of sand when my sister would make fun of me. But when the kids that were abusing me in school did it, it had a much more lasting impact.
Yeah.
A lasting effect that I still think about to this day. My family was terrific. As I told you, my sister protected me through the first year at Redland. My parents went to every school system I was having problems with and saying, you guys are obviously not doing something, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. My parents did the right thing. They were doing the right things, even though it ended up making me feel like a lab rat. I was getting tested all the time, whether it was psychologically or brain-wise, which is how they found my brain injury. But at some point, I got tired. I felt different. I acted different. I got tired of being different. And that's what I deal with today. You talk about bullying today. You can really tell a lot by how someone talks to you. If you know that, and I used to tell my wife this. When she would talk to her family, she had a different tone. It was like a very different way of talking. Kind of like when you talk to little kids, you talk to them differently than you talk to adults, even your tone of voice.
Right.
I get that from everybody at 41 years old. And it's like, why can't you just talk to me the way you were talking to so-and-so? And this isn't just about my family life, but it's also about my friends. The people who give me that condescending sound. Hey, how are you? You know, and you can tell the change. And just talk to me like I'm a normal human being.
How does that deal with your bullying?
It deals with it because it makes me feel different. When you talk to me differently than you talk to somebody else, people my age, like if I saw you with a bunch of 41-year-olds and you were talking to them differently than you were talking to me, I would tell you. Because to me it's degrading. It's disrespectful.
So it's kind of a bullying at this age. That's a different kind of bullying.
It's a different kind of bullying because what happens is like, why can't you talk to me like I'm normal? The greatest compliment I ever got in my life, I went to apply for a job at Olney Sunoco in 2003. I had no intentions of applying for that job. I went to buy a pack of cigarettes, and the cashier was like, we're hiring if you're interested, so I filled out an application. The boss hired me, said I was the worst interview he ever had in 25 years of owning the station. Said I was the worst interview he ever had. And then hired me on a probationary basis 2 days a week. Within the third week, I think it was the third week, he came up front. He said, Tony, you're hired full-time, Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. to 2. And he goes, and don't ever let anybody tell you there's anything wrong with you. Still to this day, the greatest compliment I ever got in my life.
You know, it's funny how even at this age, there are people who can get forced out of a job and their colleagues won't stand up for them. And that's kind of the way it might be in school these days, particularly on social media. It's very easy for somebody to be a real jerk, typing words into a computer, and totally different on interaction in real life. And if their peers aren't standing up to them or typing back, hey, you're the jerk for this, or even standing up outside of the computer, out of the virtual world, that's a problem.
This can show you, though, how my thinking has changed and about how I do have empathy because I have the self-confidence and self-esteem. My first position on today's bullying and cyberbullying is, how pathetic are you that you're going to put weight behind somebody typing words on a screen? That was my first position. Then my second position, I sat there thinking about it, and I was like, you know what? To them, that's as bad as having to plot all day to get on the bus without getting beaten up. the fear's there, everything about it. It's just two different ways of bullying,
Right.
but it's the same thing. And for me to be able to say, you know what, cyberbullying is a serious problem, and if it affects the person, who am I to say that the person's a wimp?
Right,
You
right.
know?
It's
Because-
a different kind of bullying. It's kind of a mental bullying because you've got, for instance, on Changing Minds, WRC TV4 program, they talked about a girl who didn't get enough likes on Instagram. Now we grew up, outside of the internet. The internet came along as we grew up. They live on the internet, the kids today.
Yeah.
So that affects them if they're it just shows you how sensitive they are to social media.
And it's not just the kids. Everyone on this planet has turned to a bunch of sensitive wimps. Nobody wants to hear the truth. Whenever you hear politicians say the truth, people back off from them. They want bullshit. They want the lies. Because, and we'll talk about it next week, where, I just found out 91% of people in America lie on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. We'll talk about that next week.
But that's an interesting thing to point out with the cyberbullying too, is that I do think it's easier to respond to cyberbullying because you're behind a keyboard. The problem is your typing has consequence. If you respond to the bully via keyboard, you're going to have to respond to him face to face when you get to school or Cub Scouts or wherever you are.
That's right.
And so there's where that fear, the same fear I had, is the fear of the kid behind the keyboard. Boy, I really want to say this, but the next time I see him, they're going to pound me into oblivion.
Yeah, and what about the peer pressure or the grouping, the bullying by kind of ganging up, and then everybody starting to say things to them online.
You bring that point, and I'm going to bring up the Columbine shootings. It is my contention that Dylan Klebold would not have been involved in that shooting if he wasn't friends with Eric Harris. If you read everything that's been out and all this, Eric Harris was the one who was disturbed. He was triggered by the not getting into the military 5 days prior to, and everyone wants to say, well, they picked 420, so they must be on drugs. Both autopsies, neither one of them were on drugs. Eric Harris is the only one that had that really disturbing background. And then you saw videos where he was leading him.
Yeah.
And he was saying, you don't have confidence and self-esteem, let's do something legendary.
Yeah.
And then he responded to that.
I think that had to do 420 with Hitler's birthday.
And when you mentioned that, I was like, okay, that makes sense. I get to a point where I was watching this documentary about it, and they were talking about how Eric Harris was actually liked by a lot of the students. Okay. So I think that when you're dealing with situations like that, everybody wants to point the finger somewhere, just like I just did. But and then I read later on that the library door where the shooting ended was open, and the cops were 20 feet outside. Why didn't they go in and spray the place?
So this bullying really, this has a problem with you starting to see the mass shooters that are affected by bullying and the suicides from bullying. So it really hits on both sides of mental illness.
Yeah, definitely.
And also with the sociopaths, the psychopaths, it triggers something, this bullying, and whether it's suicide or mass shootings, it's something that really needs to, as a society, we need to contend with it, and it's got to be done with the schools, the parents, and maybe the peers to help too.
Yeah, absolutely. And but I don't think we're ever going to come to a day and age where those students that stand up for the kid that's bullied, they're few and far between, and they're getting fewer and far between as we keep going in society. it's got to be a team effort from everything from parents to the school system to police officers. Mm-hmm. You know, there has to be a better understanding as to what the kids need. And I truly believe if you teach the bullied kids, it's going to have better effect than teaching the kids that bully. If you teach the bullied kids that, you know, someone's words don't define who you are. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's a very important key, especially with my life, to where maybe I wouldn't hold on to something for 35 years.
That's a good point. I was very confident. I was generally a confident kid, and bullying never really affected me, or what kids said in school never really affected me as much.
Yeah.
Okay, next we're going to talk about local schools, local Montgomery, Maryland schools on Truth with Tony, and that's next.
Aren't you tired of being let down? Another day, another shakedown. I'm with you when hope is gone and all you want is the truth.
One of the things I'd like to point out is after I finish with this piece, I will no longer let bullies affect my life from the past. This message is for the Kelly Blooms, it's for the Margaret Grays, it's for the Kate Fedolins. When I went to the Chelsea school and they did not hear my cries for help, my family even went to tell them something's wrong here. They would not listen to me. My therapist was incensed. Everybody in my life could not believe the treatment that I was receiving. It is my personal belief that if you send your kids to the Chelsea School in Silver Spring, Maryland, you are playing Russian roulette. I went through so much time and so much pain that it has affected me for 25 to 30 years later. I will not sit quietly anymore when I see injustices of a simple thing of accountability. The school system does not want to admit to anything that they did wrong, and had I had different experiences or different knowledge in the past, I would have encouraged my family to sue the school system. I get so hurt and so bothered when I see people in this day and age be bullied and nobody hears them. I feel their pain, I understand their pain, but it seems to be like I'm the only one noticing. Everyone else just wants to brush it off and ignore it and say that famous thing of kids being kids. I can't accept that. If you say kids are being kids, you will never fix the behavior, you will never fix the problem, you will never fix the issue. My final statement to the kids at Redland Middle School and Chelsea School and Magruder that all graduated in 1993. You guys are lucky we grew up in the day and age that we did, because had we grown up 6 years later, I would have been Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold.
This concludes Mental Health Today and our episode on bullying. That was a powerful ending, and certainly you can relate to the people who are being bullied today.
And I hope I'm able to sleep tonight because I'm pretty amped up right now.
Next week on Mental Health Today, we are going to talk about mental health and mental illness and lying. How lying is a part of mental illness. And that's all happening next week on Mental Health Today. So, for Tony Clark, I'm Mike Murray. Have a good week.